I guess that means we're starting, yeah? Yeah, let's do it. Hello and welcome to another CDR Create, Define, Release. More energy, please. I'll do the intro, of course. I'll do the bio to this wonderful man to the left of me. As so many people would say, he needs very little introduction, but Andy Carthy is with us tonight as Mr. Scruff. Producer, DJ, artist, Peak District fanatic, I hear as well, from some of the deep dives I do on the Googles. And obviously one of the most incredible presences in Manchester. We're always very delighted to see him, and I'm sure many of you have gone to Keep It Unreal, the amazing night. But obviously your career has spanned from beginning in, yeah, please do come through. 1997 was the first release, the Mr. Scruff self-titled record, and went on to release the absolutely groundbreaking Keep It Unreal in 99, and has gone on to release on Ninja Tune, even changed Ninja Tune to Ninja Tuner, his own take. I really enjoy the fact that when I look you up on Wikipedia, it says career, DJ, tea, fish. These are all the categories. It's amazing. I really enjoyed that. But obviously, you've had an incredible career, and even more incredible that you've invested so much culture, time, and energy into Manchester still, even though you've been on dance floors across the world for some amazing years. So we are so honoured to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Now, one of the things I love about this, and I promise I'll move because I'm very aware of my hair in the middle of the projector, and I didn't think this through, but I'll get the old Medusa situation down. I get to ask questions that I'm nosy and I want to ask of you.
Fine.
Yeah, so I always want to start by, I wanted desperately to ask you like how you began making music, because I'm aware you studied fine art in Sheffield.
Yeah, I started, I'm 51 now, so I was born in 1972. And I started making music or kind of messing around with tape recorders, probably age of about 7 or 8, just taping stuff off the radio. If you wanted to record a song and you couldn't afford it, you basically had a radio, and then you had a tape recorder next to it, and you put the microphone on the tape recorder next to the radio, and anyone who came in the room, you went. And that's how you made mixtapes when you're 8.
I don't think any of us were quite that cool, but at 8, I wasn't. You might have been.
But so that was, yeah, so I used to do like little radio shows, basically talk over tunes that I recorded, pretend I was a DJ. And then I got into DJing probably 83, 84, here in like the electro compilations, which are basically mixed compilations of the latest 12 inches, mostly from America. So I wanted to try this technical stuff, so I basically hijacked the family hi-fi, one turntable, one cassette deck, doing pause button edits from about the age of 12. And then I was hearing a lot of mixes on the radio, and what was happening in the 80s with the emergence of sampling and edits and electronic music, or kind of electronic dance music, is that the techniques that were used for DJing and the techniques that were being used to create music, to my ears anyway, were quite similar. So if I couldn't afford a sampler, I would record 2 bars of a James Brown tune, press pause, wind it back, unpause, pause, spend a whole day doing that, and then have a 5-minute loop. And then you'd then get another tape recorder, you play your loop, and you'd cut in some other elements over the top, or try and blend a drum track over the top, or play bass, or get a mate to rap, or try and keep a drum machine in time when there's no MIDI. So you basically kind of cobbling together. I can hear these sounds on the records, I don't know how to make them, but I've got a turntable there, I've got a twin tape deck there, I've got an old computer cassette recorder which was like about a foot long, but you had like a little vari speed on it, so you could kind of mix with it. So yeah, it went from DJing, and then when about 1986, I bought a drum machine and a bass guitar and a synth and some effects and stuff like that, and borrowed a 4-track. So it was kind of just using this very rudimentary layering. You had to plan ahead, because if you're on a 4-track or you're bouncing stuff, you'd lay down a beat, and then you'd play the tape, you'd record the beat on another tape recorder with the bass line over it, then you play the beat and the bass line again, and record maybe a melody over that, and then you'd play all that again, and you record percussion over that. Every generation, your beat and your bass line's getting buried in the mix, because it's degrading every time you're doing it. So it's just learning all about the techniques, which is kind of like what people had to do with multi-tracks when they first came out. Anyway, you listen to any of Lee Perry's early 70s recordings, and there's so much hiss, but it sounds like it's underwater, but it's amazing. So it's just getting your head around that, and then late 80s, the sort of personal computers and stuff like that. Early 90s, I borrowed a mate's Amiga and started making music on that. So it was kind of like little. I think it was a little program thing called Octamed or something like that, and similar to the way that people started making music on little gaming consoles and things. And then about 94, I bought a sampler, which was on the screen before. There we go.
I'm not good with projectors.
But anyway, I can talk.
Sorry.
But so I was going into studios and using like an Atari and Akai 900, 950 samplers, and just making music with MIDI and outboard. And then bought an MPC 60. That was under the influence of Mark Ray and Grand Central Records. In the mid-90s, there was a label that was kind of affiliated, basically the same people who were involved in the Fat City record store.
Yes.
And they, we were all really into, American hip-hop and stuff like that. And then once we found out that, right, DJ Premier uses one of those, then we all bought one, you know what I mean? So it was basically, this drum machine's from 1987, and I still use it now. I've not cleaned it since 1987, as you can see. But that's mono with full memory expansion. It's 25-second sampling memory. It's got 2 banks of 16 samples, and you save all the samples on 2 floppy disks, which takes about 15 minutes. But I think the limitations, you can't really sample very much, so you work around it by sampling single hits of drums, trimming every microsecond off a sample that you're not using. If you're sampling something off an album, you speed up to 45+8 and then tune it down, which is why a lot of the 90s hip-hop had a real lo-fi sound, because not only were these 12-bit mono machines like this and the SP1200, but in order to make use of the tiny memory, you had to sample everything really quickly and then slow it down. So you were losing a lot of definition then, but that was the whole sound of hip hop in those times. It was quite sort of crusty and muddy, and something which worked well because you couldn't have too many elements going on. You could have a kick, a snare, a hi-hat, a loop, a bass line, and then you were like, memory's full. So
shouts to everyone whose project currently has about 60 channels in there. It wouldn't fly. It wouldn't fly back then, okay?
So that's it. I'm talking about technology rather than anything else. But mid-90s, I started putting records out, remixing, started DJing as well. But I've always been into lots of different styles of music. And I think especially using, computers and samplers, the way that you're able to kind of literally take so many influences and kind of mess around with them, mimic things, repeat them, kind of try and disguise them so you don't get sued, all that kind of thing.
Half of the battle, innit?
But but I like the thing of working alone with a sampler and taking bits of other people's music, and it's kind of like you're having a conversation. You can kind of almost arrange like an imaginary band in your head, because you can have Clyde Stubblefield, James Brown's drummer, playing with Lionel Hampton, with Aretha Franklin on vocals if you want, you know what I mean? And let's have Eric Gale on guitar, and then we're going to have I don't know, Ronnie Foster on, whatever. It's great to be able to use the mind, the sort of DJ brain, and the knowledge that's been accrued from years and years and years and years of scouring record shops and knowing, right, that record's got a great snare on it, that one's got a great little timbale hit, or there's a fantastic hi-hat on the intro on that album there. But so you're building your own drum kits and kind of sample things, and it was I think in the 90s especially, when sampling technology became affordable, there was a lot of people who wouldn't been seen dead using a sample pack, you know what I mean, or anything like that. It's like, no, I've got to find a snare that no one else has had, you know what I mean, or I can't use that drum break because matey released it, something with that drum break, 2 months ago or whatever. So it was weird, this kind of weird sort of competitive, but very nerdy ethic kind of pervaded
and it always
a lot of music.
I feel.
Yeah. But it's interesting now because I'll happily use something off Apple Loops now. I'm not bothered. But 20 years ago I would have been like, no, I've got to
thrown out.
Yeah, exactly.
Lost the keys to the city, everything. And so what's this?
Here's another toy, which is the SP1200. That's got 10 seconds in mono. And same again. These old drum machines have such a kind of a certain sound to them, which people love.
I've really missed floppy disks. I've realised I missed them. And all the rubbish things we used to write on that didn't make no sense.
Yeah. And obviously, as technology's moved on, I've started making music on a laptop, and I kind of use this laptop as like a way to collect all the other sounds. So I still work a lot with audio. But now if I switch the SP or the MPC on, I'm more like jam stuff in live because I want it a bit, a bit drunk kind of thing. You know what I mean? And same with keyboards or whatever. I don't use a lot of MIDI really. It's just like get the audio in, record the effects at the same time, kind of commit, still leave myself loads of options. You should see some of my tracks once I unhide all the tracks. It's like, hang on. But it's still like that initial thing of just banging keys and buttons and getting something going.
Well, it's like decisive experimentation, which I'm not good at. I don't know about anyone else. Like the decisiveness of that, and it's the same as you say, it's like, I'm going to need 5 versions of this for different days when I come back and listen to it and think it should go one way or another. So it's really, there's so much merit in using hardware and just using the computer as a sort of go-between, I suppose, between your in your studio. Yeah,
I still, I use a lot of plugins, but I don't really use a lot of synths or, I use some effects and things. But I find that because obviously if on any kind of DAW, you can have, 100 EMT plate reverbs, whereas if you're in a studio, you're lucky if you've got one. So you kind of have to do it on the desk, which I sometimes do, and run it through, or just record each. If I want different variations of certain effects, then I'll just record that as I'm playing it in live, and then just tweak it a little bit for the next element. So I've got everything separate. I can automate mad filters on the reverbs or whatever, but it's a lot of decision making taken out later down the line, and you're also playing through the effect, which I think generally means you do less stuff because there's a nice kind of sort of frothy tail after it.
Yeah, nice.
So I'm sort of gonna. I've put some pictures in. So this is some. I went in the studio today and took some images.
I love this. This is like cribs for me. Like seeing people's setups.
Sort of. Yeah, so that's the desk, which is an Audion
tiny
desk, which is, you get these in a lot of education facilities, and for what you get, they're really versatile, and anyone who's been to Salford will use one of these. So they're not kind of revered for their their kind of vintage sound or anything like that, but they're just in terms of routing and what you want to do and think, I want to patch that to that, then it's a really useful bit of kit. And most of the stuff I've got is like nearly as old as I am, so having a desk that's new and isn't going to break, because that's the centerpiece of the studio, you don't really want that to go down. But I think same again, it's just nice. It makes music making much a more physical thing, and you're just committing. It's like, well, I've got 24 tracks, which is quite a lot, but then that's only 12 stereo tracks.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, you don't end up putting too much in your tunes simply because you can't. You're limited by the amount of tracks you've got.
What are these?
Those I've got close-ups of those. That's some Masterbus stuff. But anyway,
Sorry.
that's all right. That's all right.
It's all right.
Here's the least fun bit of the studio, which is a patch bay.
How long would it take you to repatch that if you
I wouldn't.
moved studio? I mean, I can tell you're never going to move studio again because of it.
Yeah, it takes a while. It took me a year to plan the studio.
Wow.
Like plan all the patch bay, because you're having to work out all your cable lengths, all your cable types, and then finding someone old enough to be able to remember how to basically solder an entire patch bay. So there's a lot of planning, because you have to, you sort of have to lay out your patch bay how your studio's laid out. It's like, I've not used this room before. Then you have to, so this is kind of, on a patch bay, it just be across like that. So this is all the preamp stuff. This is what I record into. So there's a Drama compressor, Drama EQ. At the bottom there's like an Eve clone, and which is quite characterful, and then this Phoenix thing, which is very clean. So I can kind of jam a lot of stuff with MIDI and record a lot of things at once, just with having a few different preamps which all have their own channel on the desk. So this is probably my favourite effect for running stuff into, which is the Ursa Major.
Oh, yeah.
I first heard about this when I did a gig with Mad Professor about 15 years ago, and he had a rhythm called Ursa Major. And I was like, what's that? And then I realised that they used to have one in Strawberry Studios that Martin Hannett used. And a few years ago I managed to get hold of one. But it's a bit broken, so if you leave it on for more than half an hour, the reverb tail just goes... It's almost
kind of amazing, though.
It's almost like it's losing bit depth. So there's a certain little window before it's completely destroyed that you get this broken sound that no plugins on it going to ever give you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But then it's like, it's going to overheat in a bit. I better turn it off. But it's so but this, that's probably like 40 years old. These are weird drum synths which are sometimes MIDI up, but they're just nice to do that with. This one's a kind of Japanese one that's like got 4 different sounds. I think there's a plug-in version of that as well. Here's a Syncussion clone, and here's some mad thing that I just bang with a stick, and it goes boo.
Amazing. So these are the 4 sounds, and these are all the ways of manipulating them, like the.
Yeah, but you can't trigger on that, so you have to do it via MIDI. Well, you have drum pads with it, but I just MIDI it up, and then you can tweak the sounds.
I'm so lazy.
But it's fun, because I think that kind of thing, when you get bits of kit, because I'm not very good with MIDI and all the outboard things, the kind of thing like when you set up an old school studio, you do it once, it's all in your head, and then when it works, you forget how it all comes together. And then starting to do it again, it's like, this stuff I used to be able to do like 20 years ago, why can't I do it now? But it's a bit of swearing and a couple of hours of head scratching and a bit of YouTube, and then it's all back on. This is a beast. This is the Roland SH5, which is like a spaceship.
It's amazing. And
it's a mad kind of mono synth from 1975, and this is something I was after one for a long time, because the studio that I recorded Ninja Tuner and a few of my other albums in, they had one. So I knew my way round it inside out, and it's such a kind of gooey beast, you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. Right, other extreme. So basically, this is like if you're feeling religious in your front room, and this is the Kawai DX900, which was Kawai's, I think it was their last analog synth, and I paid 50 quid for it.
What?
And I paid about 150 quid to get it delivered, and then I had to saw it in half to get it in my basement studio, and then stick it back. No, like lengthways.
Yeah,
all the electronics are in the top half,
right?
And then you've got the big bass with the rotating speaker and the pedals, and all the amps are in the bottom. So I had to chop it in half. Imagine if you had to do that with every plugin. But it's amazing, and this thing's got bass pedals. It's got 3 keyboards, but because it's meant for like a single performer to do a full tune, all the sounds fit really well together. Yeah, it's proper kind of grotty but beautiful as well. We're almost there. Oh, this is something more modern. This is like my MIDI controller thing, but this is fun to tweak as well. The Moog Sub 37, which is just it's just a beast, and it's you get some crazy frequencies out of that. Once you get beyond all the kind of hideous sort of trance presets and stuff like that, and it's like, what's this? And then you start moving it. Oh, that's what it is. Okay, I like you now. So that's great. Underneath is EMU sampler, which I used to use a lot. Hasn't been switched on for many years, but the fan is louder than my speakers in the studio. It's crazy.
It's always the way, innit? Yeah.
And then this is the stuff that was on the desk. So this top one is the SSL Bus Plus. These are all new. and the bottom is the SSL Fusion, and I just run stuff through that, like either like just a couple of tracks or like the master bus or whatever it needs really. But it's kind of really nice to just glue stuff together.
Yeah.
And same again, you can sort of tweak it on the fly when you're right between the speakers as well, which is right on the meter bridge. And that little thing on top is a Auratone speaker or an Auratone clone, which is just like an awful sounding little powered speaker, but it's really good for getting your volumes done, because I only have one, so you're not worrying about stereo. Obviously, most people listen to music on the phone or whatever. So if you're mixing and you've got some lovely panning going on, it's like, just let me listen on this awful
on the truth.
awful speaker. Yeah. And it's Quincy Jones used to use them, and it's just like, there's not a lot of bottom end, there's not a lot of top end, but it's really good just for your volume. It's not necessarily for EQ or anything. So if you got loads of mad stereo stuff going, just let me listen to this grotty thing in mono. I can hear everything back to back to the big speakers.
Yeah.
And then very analog, especially a bin full of shakers. So
bucket of sounds.
So and that kind of sort of process wise, it's like I just jam a lot of stuff, and then if I invite people in the studio, and this is where it's kind of really kind of comes into its own, is you can just switch everything on, have everything on its own channel in the desk, just press record, and go, well, let's get busy, you know what I mean? And then someone's like, you're turning round, because obviously when you're used to playing by yourself, there's never any, whoa, what's that?
Yeah.
Unless, I don't know, unless you knock a cup of
cables
tea
come
over
out,
or something.
Oh, don't.
but it's so when there's a few of you jamming, it's people, there's a lot of happy accidents, and because people are finding their way around the equipment, and you're like, how did you get that noise? I've had that synth for 10 years, and you've just come and like,
it's mad, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think having like guests in your creative space, I think is really, it's like having people around for dinner. You know what I mean? You set it all up. You make sure you do your shopping and get all the washing up done, and then you just relax and have fun. Yeah.
And you remember it, unlike many dinner parties.
Yes.
And have evidence.
Yes.
Unlike many dinner parties.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So you've been super generous. This track is very fresh. How fresh is this track?
This one, I've not, in the spirit of CDR, I've not brought anything I've actually finished.
Yes.
So this is something I kind of was working on last week. I've got another version of this which I started today, and then like about 3 or 4 hours ago, all the electricity went in my house. So it was like, that's why I was in the back before and being a bit rude, not listening to everyone's tunes, because I was just trying to finish this one for today. But here's something, I've no idea, it's not got a name or anything that fancy yet. I'm just going to ease the volume in just in case I blow your head off like I did before. And I won't play the whole thing because, you might not be saying that in 2 minutes. So it's a bit weird watching the tune, isn't it? Maybe I should take it off for a bit.
No, I think it's part of my learning. And I really appreciate the colour coding, my goodness.
Shut your eyes.
Yo, this the joint. 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 This the joint. Yo, this the joint. Yo, this the joint. Yo, this the joint.
Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. So many influences in there. So many genres within that.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's weird because I've not like there's no buses, no compression. That's all. But I think you need to get stuff sounding as good as you can before you start boxing it in. You know what I mean? I mean sometimes the compressor can be something you push against, but for me like. Especially if you're sampling stuff that's already been mastered as well.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, sometimes you want to do sidechain compression, but you can kind of draw it in with automation or whatever. Yeah. So I use a lot of fades and things just to kind of get stuff sitting. And then I'm just going to quickly play another one because this... No, I don't want to save that. This is...
Colour coding's exceptional.
Thank you.
Exceptional.
Thank you.
This
is the same tune, but this morning I had a little... This is how I often... if you listen to the voice notes on my phone, I sound like the worst beatbox ever. But it always starts with a little drum pattern, and I walk around the house, I'm like, ooh, boom, boom, chack, boom, boom, chack, chack. And I record it on my phone, and then I put the little voice note in the track, so I'll get the tempo right, and sort of use that as a groove. And it's often just the tempo which... I'm walking at, and I must have had a lot of coffee this morning because this is like nearly 160 BPM. But this is only a little one, but this is the same tune, same elements. And what I was quite pleased with this, the other tune was 98. This is 155, and I think it's nearly like 1.5 times the tempo or something like that, or a bit more. But you're getting a little bit of triplet stuff in it, which was completely unintentional, but it kind of gives it a bit of a mad. Slippery thing, but I'm gonna stop wittering and put it on.
Some good coffee, man. Real good.
joint.
That's right, y'all.
It's the joint, 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 joint.
That's right, y'all. That's right, y'all.
I can't wait to lose my shit to that on a dance floor very soon.
And that was today.
Amazing.
So it was. Well, I liked the pressure. I just thought I didn't want to bring in a load of tunes that people knew. As just like in the spirit of this whole event, people are bringing what they've just created and are probably a bit nervous about sharing. You know what I mean? Because it's a weird one, like especially having all your arrange page up on the screen. You know what I mean? Because it's also a very strange way of listening to music. But I mean, for me, that was just. I mean, there's a lot of tracks in there, but there's generally element effects. So everything's in pairs, and quite a lot of the time. I mean, I should have really.
That's a very organised way of doing it. I will try to take that energy.
But also, say for instance, because I'm using audio a lot, but I don't want to go crazy on automation and be drawing stuff in, and I want to be able to see what I've done.
Yeah.
Quite often, if I have like some hi-hats, I might split them up onto 3 tracks, just so I can mess around with the levels.
Or potentially effects with one.
Yeah.
There was that really interesting, whatever that effect was coming near the end as well, where it was sort of triplets, but not.
Well, that was just because that was the hi-hats from the previous version of it, but I've not messed with them. So you had 98 BPM hi-hats over 155 BPM. So a lot of it was chopped up, and some of it was like, oh, that's quite slithery, you know what I mean? Because that's how I sample. I mean, when I did Get a Move On, I had the Moondog loop, and then I had the T-Bone Walker, which is the blues sample, the vocal, and I just played the album over the top of my loop, and the bit I sampled just happened to kind of
line up.
You know, sort of click at the point.
That was divine intervention.
Yeah. But that same again. That's 3/2.
So good.
You know, so there's a lot of that going on in modern music anyway. You know, a lot of the Prince Pay and so much kind of African electronic music, but a very not a kind of slinky polyrhythm, quite a rude kind of like 3, 2. Yeah. Get on with it. You know what I mean? There's no like, you know, it's not particularly saucy, you know what I mean, but it's still like relentless, which I love, and that just happened to kind of fall into that little pocket. So it's like, okay, yeah, I can get with that. But I also like the fact that those 2 things are so different as well, and I've not added any new sounds to that. That's not even processed differently. It's just like, so it's almost like you're making your own sample pack, you know what I mean? And I think that's kind of half of it, because for me the sounds really dictate what you do with them. And sometimes, you know, I've got a little Apple Loops shaker in there, but the rest of it's just me attempting to shake in time, you know what I mean? And then what would you
advise? Oh, spacebar, go on. What would you advise people who are making Yay, round 2, baby. Advising people, I lost my train of thought because I actually really love this track, I'm sorry. If people are interested, if they don't already, like making their own sample packs, like have you got any advice, like 2 pieces of advice for people building on that kind of little arsenal of tools?
Maybe get a Zoom recorder or something. I think that, because when I'm out and about, you know, I'll walk under a little underpass or under a bridge or something, and there'll be some amazing little flutter echo. I mean, you get that in most houses anyway, through a parallel walls, and you're like in a certain spot in the room, you can clap and it goes. It's like, well, I like that. I'm going to sample that, but it's only if you hold the mic there. You know what I mean? It's like if it's there, you can't hear it. So I think it's having. I mean, obviously you can do it all on our phones as well. It's just like, oh, wow, the reverb in here is amazing. Or I don't know, like seeing if you can blag your way into the Bridgewater Hall and just like go and clap for a couple of minutes. You know what I mean? While no one else is in there.
I've already got a terrible reputation for being a nut job like that. She's
slow
clapped
clap
for 2 hours. Yeah, slow clap at the end.
But I think it's just grab a load of stuff, or you know, I I don't really make sample packs. I just get a collection of stuff that I want to use in the tune, and it might be like, I want that drum machine, that synth, that shaker, that tambourine, and maybe, that hi-hat or whatever. And
I kind of love what you said before as well about your beginnings in using this, is that you were borrowing things and going around to other people's studios, and still, even what you said with Ninja Tunes as well, you had access to certain things going there. I think that's something that I personally always want to encourage, especially in Manchester. I feel like perhaps that's not happening as often as it could and should. Yes. And I think maybe, basically, one of you please buy one of these expensive things and invite me around. That's what I'm trying to say. But no, I think it's really good to like try and share and pull different sounds. And again, just like you say, someone else's approach to something that you've had sitting in your studio for ages. There can be new sounds like in infuriating 5 seconds, but it's a really important exchange of energy, I suppose, in each other's studio spaces and what we have access to.
Yeah, I think so. And the thing is, you can make music with anything. And half the time that can be something that's not designed as an instrument. And, I'm sure everyone in here is like, I don't know, like put a brew down on the table, or maybe washed up a metal bowl, and accidentally hit it with a wooden spoon. It's gone gong, gong. It's like, right, just, can you go and get, let's get the mic out in the kitchen, keep it away from the sink, but we've got some amazing little, kind of, sort of tonal variations and stuff like that. Every time you walk out, we'll all have these trained ears where every time we walk onto the road, the rhythm of that, locomotive in the train station, you know what I mean? Or that door shutting. I don't want to start pretending to be slow-mo, but it's like, but it's still like there are attractive sounds which I need to capture that, you know what I mean? And sometimes just walking around and going, well, I'm just going to, set up a microphone near something I like the sound of, but I want to capture the room noise as well. Stuff in corridors is great. I used to have a friend's studio at Islington Mill, and that was we used to do congas and claps and stuff in the corridor. Obviously there'd be people walking up going, "What on earth are you doing?" But you need to, be prepared to look a bit of a fool, because you're going to be there like looking like some, sort of wildlife, field recorder. But this is how you get the elements. And it's like, well, I've got my clap and I've got the most amazing reverb because someone's clapping downstairs and I'm 3 stories up. And then it's like, wow, the tail on that clap, or I'm just going to like cut that dead. Or reverse it, or once you've got it, once you've sort of taken it back home to your lair, and you're like, well, I've done the recording, and the act of recording and taking it back to the studio then informs what techniques you use next time you go recording. It's like, I wish I'd done this, or I wish I'd done that. But also it's like, well, I've got a load of sounds that no one else will ever have, and I've started a tune with them. And it might be like, I was in, I think, Bordeaux last year, and I walked under this bridge and it had the most amazing echo. And I luckily had a mate of mine who was my sound engineer on that gig, so he was holding my Zoom recorder with the headphones on so he could hear what I was doing. And I was just walking around when people weren't cycling or walking under the bridge. And whenever you start recording, suddenly it gets really busy. But yeah, having someone, same again, that's teamwork, like you're saying, going to people's studios, like go out in 2s or 3s and make some noises. Clap in weird places.
And the other one explain to the public what's going on.
And often the places where you get the best sounds are obviously generally the least well lit, dodgy places anyway. So you could do with a bit of support. But I think it's just hunt for sounds. The same way people like hunt for drum breaks on records or whatever. It's like, well, let me just go out at this particular time of the day to this space when there's no traffic or too much background noise and get some crazy sounds.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Twigs, snow. I spent last winter. I've got a tune on here which I'll never find, but I put a metronome on my Zoom recorder in my headphones and went out for a walk in winter when there was like a really nice crunchy like cornflake snow. And just for 25 minutes I was walking at 125 BPM. But then I knew
after one of these coffees.
But then I knew I had basically a live percussion thing for as long as I wanted that was always going to be in time.
Yeah, it's a big show actually doing that. I've got a little metronome on my phone, like actually trying to do it in time. It saves you those hours of screaming and getting things in sync and stuff. Yeah, that's amazing advice. I wanted to ask you another thing as well. Actually, I read when I was deep diving on your background, and you said that you were annoyed with yourself if you don't push yourself whenever you're making a track. So I wanted to ask a little bit about that. Like, do you have ways of? Do you feel like if you ever get into a rut, or like there's certain ways that you start a track, you almost challenge yourself and try and do it in a different way, or?
I don't. Well, it's not about, you're not trying to reinvent yourself or anything, because I think kind of choosing picking a musical seam and kind of mining it for a bit is really useful, you know. And a lot of the artists that I really admire, you know, say for instance, Rhythm and Sound or something like that, all their records do sound quite similar, but they arrived at that thing in a very particular way, and that's why their music sounds like that. But for me, it's just, you know, when you're being lazy, I think, you know, whatever that is. And I think it's not about, you know, musically I'm all over the place because of my influences, and I think sometimes that's a blessing and sometimes that's a curse, because you're trying to do everything but you know you can't. But however, I think a lot of those things over the years, they kind of become part of you, and you start combining things in a way which just feels very natural, because you're familiar with all the source material or all the influences or the history of it all. And I think that's also, you know, I'm the same when I'm DJing. I've never done the same DJ set twice. You know, it's like unless I'm doing something with a vocalist where that, you know, we've worked on a bit of a set, so it's like a live PA thing. But it's just like, because the opportunity for learning is in that moment. And obviously you've got to have some idea of what you're doing. And for me, like, technically having yourself sorted out, right, I know where everything is. You know, I've got tea bags, I've got, you know, all my stuff's been serviced or whatever, or I switched my phone off, I've not got this to do, you know what I mean, I've done the washing up, I've, you know, bought some bread. And then it's just like, you can just get in there and you're not like, oh no, I wish I'd updated those plugins, you know what I mean, because I'm getting this little thing, or, you know, you're getting little reminders and stuff. So I think it's the thing that you should be quite diligent about, I think, is all the technical side, just making sure everything's updated, everything's working, everything's tested. But that comes from a gig background, I think, because, or just having other people in the studio. Because if you have someone round and then you're like, oh, just give me 45 minutes, I can't remember, you know, I can't remember where this is plugged into, you know what I mean? It's a bit embarrassing. So I think that thing of just being really on it up to the point where you start creating and having fun, and then it should be pure joy, you know what I mean? And you should be able to, then you can make mistakes and you know, just allow these happy accidents to happen, because, and it's all getting captured as well.
Yeah, amazing. Nice. So we're going to open it out to we've got time for a couple of questions from the crowd, if that's cool
fine,
with you.
Of course.
Within reason. No, I'm joking. Where are Jeremy Kyle mics? I want you running around at all times with those, furiously. Please raise your hand if you have a question for Andy. Oh, intimidated, or just everything's been answered?
Hello.
Hello. Go on, Rod.
You just mentioned before making tracks with like a 3 against 2 kind of Afrobeat thing. Do you find it kind of a little bit more difficult to do it, kind of doing kind of like 4/4 kind of stuff? For me, it's been like quite a learning curve to understand that style.
Not really, because I think like it's almost like, I mean, any kind of swing, because you know, I suppose like swinging music and kind of the whole thing about funk and kind of having something in the pocket in terms of like, you know, coming from like a Black American perspective, because that's where the term was coined. That's kind of like a consolidation of polyrhythms, but through an American lens. So I think kind of spending a lot of my, you know, childhood and youth listening to kind of a lot of funk and soul and stuff like that, you kind of internalize that kind of funky thing where things are a bit late or a bit early and they kind of move around and the tempo's going up and down, and obviously there's variation in volume and kind of intensity, and there's a lot of dynamics. So obviously then when you trace that back to its original source, or you listen to a lot of African music where it is truly polyrhythmic, a lot of 6/8 stuff, a lot of 3/2, it's kind of, it's just the way the beat pushes you around, the same way like a J Dilla beat will push you around. And I think, I don't know, it's a kind of looseness, and talking from a production perspective about getting the feel right of something, you want something kind of really almost like it's falling over, and then something catches it. And sometimes that thing is the snare. You know, the kick's like pushing, so the kick's like, ugh, and the snare's like, I've got you. And then the beat's like, ugh. And it's, you know, but it's just that, it's that kind of, especially with hip hop production, which is that kind of, Mark Ray in the 90s used to call it the lizard neck. Basically, when you had a beat which was just,
it's super physical.
yeah,
That's the key.
and it's
not making you move.
And I think that, you know, rather than thinking about kind of the mathematics of it, or kind of I'm trying to put this 3/2, it's just like, is it making me pull a face or do the lizard neck? And if it is, you've got it. And if it feels, but sometimes, you know, sometimes like with a lot of the Principe stuff, which is, you know, mostly out of Lisbon, and that's very, very. I mean, it's, you know, this is kind of generalising, but it's very kind of insistent. It's like straight 3s over straight 2s, but that it's kind of so nagging and almost slightly irritating. But they're also switching it every 4 or 8 bars, you know. So it's kind of like there's another dynamic at play, which is, you know, which is kind of different to a lot of, you know, traditional program dance music, which generally has, you know, 8, 16, 32 bar sections, you know, 12 if you're feeling a bit naughty. And these are kind of switching it all over the time, and there's obviously, you know, there's a lot of really loud elements, and it's quite grating, but it's still got its own funk and its own logic. And I think it's like, you know, whether you're creating a style of music, or you're kind of falling into a pattern of a music style that you want to become part of and emulate and then subsequently contribute to, or whether you're just on your own, you know, on your own sort of wobbly internal clock, you have to know when it's right and wrong. And I think some of that comes from copying stuff and go, all right, well, I can kind of recreate that now. How do I then add something to it so it's not a pastiche? You know, because we all copy other people when, you know, especially early in our development. And sometimes, like that tune I did today just happened to sound like one of those tunes because I'd done that thing with the tempo and not bothered to quantize everything. And, you know, the way I chopped it up, you know, it was sort of slipping away in triplets and then catching itself again. Completely random depending on where I chopped the audio. And sometimes it sounded great and I kept those bits in. Other times it's like, oh, that's a mess. I'll have to either tighten that up or leave it out. So I think it's I think whether you're talking about time signatures or feel or kind of, especially if you're making music by yourself, kind of creating opportunities for, you know, for kind of innovation or something special to happen, you have to have that balance of tightness and preparation and solidity and reliability and looseness of like, whoa, what did I just do there? And kind of, or just creating situations where these accidents can happen as well. It's, but I think that all depends on how you are as a person as well. Some people aren't very, you know, I've learned over the years to get prepared, because, you know, that's from gigs. Because if you're not prepared at a gig and you've not got your spare turntables and you've not sound checked and done everything properly, then you pay the price for that. So then that carries into the studio, especially when you have guests there. So I think it's, yeah, I've not really answered your question there, but I think it's don't think about it too much. It's definitely a physical thing. I think music's really physical, and it's like once you hit on something that gets you excited, and this is probably one of the only kind of really good sort of not very long-winded tips I've got, but like when you hit on something that's really excited, stop and leave it for an hour or two, because I had years of like being in the studio for 12 hours and almost like ironing out all the feeling from a tune, You know, so it's like, you know, some people like they do 50 minutes and then right, I'm going to walk around the block, even if I'm really enjoying it. All right, I'll put that snare there and I'll sort that reverb level. Right, I know I'm still buzzing, but I've got to go and have a brew or walk around the block and then come back, and then you're hearing it fresh. You're hearing it fresh, because I think one of the difficult things with production, as opposed to creating music live in the moment, is that you're always listening to it far more than anyone else will ever do.
And then you got to tour it.
Yes.
I never want to hear it again. But no, that's not true.
So I think it's like, you know, you stop when the going's good. You don't leave yourself with it. That's, you know, almost like rinsing the tune over and over and over and over again, and maybe mixing it and, you know, listening too loud, and then your mixes become more trebly because your ears are compressing and trying to protect your hearing. And you come back the next day and go, what was I thinking? Whereas 5 hours prior to that, and we've all done it, I've done it hundreds of times, and now it's like, you know, leaving yourself with a problem the next day is a bit like going to bed after a Sunday roast and not washing up, you know what I mean?
Yes. I'm sorry I shouted, but yes. This is so true. I'm an idiot. I keep doing this, but you're so right. It's great advice.
What I'd like to hear is, like, in terms of little... Because I think what, you know, it's interesting to see how people put together tunes. But in terms of, I think, you know, from hearing... a majority kind of electronic music being played before, which means that you're interacting with a device and probably spending a long time in a small room. Is like, does anyone have any interesting tips for kind of how to almost balance out your own worst habits when you're in the studio? Like, does anyone have any rules where, like, yeah, I'm gonna stop at this time, or whenever I'm listening to a final mix, I always like put the screen on black so I'm not watching the waveforms, you know what I mean? Does anyone have any interesting tips?
If I ever start over EQing, I'll stop. So I tend to just roll too much off the top too much. I'll just, right, I'm overdone my ears. That's probably, I'll just stop for about half an hour or something to come back to it.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, because even at moderate volume, I think if you're listening for 3 or 4 hours without a break, you're not hearing straight, and I think then you're going to be making choices which you're going to regret the next day. So I think it's always good to have a break, or listen. Sometimes I listen really quietly in mono so I can barely hear it.
I bounce it down, I listen really quietly, and I watch something. I like put something on mute, maybe like David Attenborough, or maybe just like some pretentious clip from a, you know, when it's like independent, if it's like indie cinema, the scene will be painfully long, won't it? Be someone getting a sandwich, but we'll see the whole emotion of deciding they're hungry and all that. So I'll put it in the background of that so that my brain's taken out of context. It's not in the box in all the MIDI and all the files and all the automation and stuff. I find that really helpful, to just listen to it in a different context, as if it's the soundtrack to this scene or something. That's helpful.
And there were some hands up over here.
I had the same one as that as well, but also sometimes I'm like in a creative mood to write, so I just write the track like in a couple of hours. Like, it's obviously not got much variation, and then I go, right, next day do the same thing, right, just make loads, and then go back to them. Yeah. Like, don't do any like mixing, don't do anything like that. Like, yeah, I think 'cause sometimes like your creative juices for writing run low, and when you're in that space to be creative, just get as much creative writing done. That's a tip.
Great advice.
Yeah, that's really good.
I guess kind of similar, learning to compartmentalize when you're in like a writing zone and then like a mix down zone or an arrangement mode. Like, writing is very like right-brained creative thing, but doing a mix down is very objective. So when you're in the zone for like making cool noises, sometimes you're not actually like writing a tune. Maybe it's just like a sound design session. You're just making fun noises, saving them to a bank, making cool loops or whatever. Maybe you will get like a 16-bar thing that could turn into a tune, but you're not using the same part of your brain to be analytical and like mix it down in an objective sense. So learning to realize when your brain is in writing mode and when your brain is in mix down mode, and kind of working with the grain is something.
You're not putting pressure on your brain.
Yeah, like trying to force your brain to be creative when it's not up for it, or trying to do a mix down when you're just making cool sounds. Don't fight whatever your brain is in the mode for. Just go with it, keep it going, and then when you switch to the other mode, then tackle the other side of it.
Yeah, I think they're all really helpful, and it's just interesting because I think a lot of people have the same issues because you are, generally it's one person doing everything, and quite often your arrangement and mixing can get a bit combined, and then you're like, oh, just let me listen to this snare, and 2 hours later you're like, you've just ruined your snare and not done anything else. You know what I mean? So it's I think with my stuff, like, it's just like recording stuff in and getting the EQ and the reverb. Well, that sounds great. And when you're like, well, that snare's just maybe pull a little face and do that, so I'm going to record that, and I don't need to touch that now because I maybe should put a little photo of my face when I listen to the snare, just to remind me that it doesn't need another snare on top of it, or it doesn't need beefing up or EQing, or kind of adding to. But yeah, I mean, my thing is I record so many tracks. Sometimes like 50, 60, 100 tracks of different variations because I got, a bit stuck. Let me just record a load of more stuff.
What would you in the 90s say? Hey?
In the 90s, that wouldn't have been possible, would
exactly.
it? Exactly. Yeah. It's like, let's just roll in another 24 track and get the sympathy done. But it's, but I think everybody also knows their own issues in terms of their own bad habits and stuff like that. And I think sometimes, with shorter studio sessions, like quite, similar to what you were saying about the 2-hour track writing session, I'd to get myself back into the studio after a bit of time off, I just go in the studio at 8 o'clock every morning and go like, I want tune done by 10. And it was same again, it was like complete from scratch. Oh, let's try this drum machine today, or this synth, and bit of percussion. And after about half an hour, you had something together, and then hour and a half, couple of hours if you're on it.
Yeah.
And no one's bothering you because that's a good time of the day for.
You've limited your time as well, so there's like that element. I used to do things called 40-minute masterpieces, which were not masterpieces, but I gave myself 40 minutes, and that was just to get better on Ableton Live. Like, I just wanted to get good, and I knew that putting that time pressure on as well, it improves your skills, because all of us just want to get so good on what we're making music on that if I hear it, I can make it sound just like that, and that takes time and it takes a bit of discipline. So that I always found, I mean, some of them I will never listen to again. I can't legally listen to any of those again, but yeah, I think the time pressure is a very interesting one, because we kind of associate time pressure with like school and exams and things, and then you bring it into your creative world, you're like, I'm not sure about this, but then you find you've done like really amazing stuff and made quick decisions that you would have dallied for a whole day about, if not. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of going about it.
Yeah, I think it's just, working under your own steam completely can be a bad thing. So I think it's just going, what would I do if someone else was here? You know what I mean? You're almost like, you're trying to create a situation where there's like, almost like the image of someone watching over you with a watch there, like that. Like, sort it out, you know what I mean? You've had 10 minutes on that bass line, now you need to like commit and like go on to something else. Yeah. But it's such a, I don't know, it's such an amazing thing being, we're all in a position where we've somehow, as whatever paths our lives have taken us to this point, where we're able to just get in a room or some environment by ourselves or with other people and just do something that we love and get in some kind of mad zone where you're completely on it, where you might not be in any other area of your life, but you're like, right, for those 2 hours, even if what you come out with is rubbish, it's like, that was great fun, you know what I mean? And I think that's, that's really important. I think having a solitary activity where you can create something for yourself and other people to enjoy, but also go on a little bit of a personal voyage of discovery as well. I think that's a wonderful thing.
I think that is a perfect and lovely way to end our talk and carry on with some of the open decks. Thank you so much.
Real pleasure. Thank you.